If this story touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little light today. Let's spread goodness, one story at a time. Yunus sat by his window, watching the sky turn orange. He held a pencil in his hand and a small notebook on his lap. He whispered, "If I could send a letter to Allah, what would I say?" He flipped to a fresh page and wrote in neat letters, "Dear Allah, why do some people get sick? Why do some kids feel lonely? And do you hear me when I talk in my head?" He paused, thinking. Then he added, "I don't want toys. I just want to understand you better. Love, Yunus." He folded the paper carefully, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it under his pillow. "You already know what's inside," he whispered, "but maybe it's nicer when I write it." The next morning, Yunus felt different. He prayed Fajr slowly, like he was really talking to someone who was listening. At school, his friend Kareem looked sad. Yunus remembered one of his questions. Why do some kids feel lonely? He walked over and said, "You can sit with me today if you want." Kareem smiled a little. "Thanks." That moment felt like a quiet answer, like Allah was saying, "You're not alone." And now neither is he. That night, Yunus wrote a second letter. "Dear Allah, today I learned that helping someone feel seen made me feel seen too. Was that from you?" As he lay in bed, he heard his mom reciting Quran. The verse said, "And he is with you wherever you are." Yunus 57. He sat up straight. "Wait, my name is in that surah." The next day he wrote, "Dear Allah, I heard my name in the Quran. Was that your way of smiling at me?" At the masjid, he asked his teacher, "If I write to Allah, does he really get it?" The teacher smiled. "Before your pen touches the paper, he already knows what's in your heart." Yunus whispered, "But it still feels nice to write." "Then keep writing," his teacher replied. "And keep reading what he wrote to you. His words are in the Quran." That night, Yunus opened his notebook again, but instead of writing questions, he wrote, "Dear Allah, thank you for being closer than I thought." Days passed. He kept writing. Not every day, not always long. Sometimes just a line, "Please help Mama's headache go away. Please make me brave tomorrow. Please forgive me for rolling my eyes." One day he didn't write anything. He just sat, quiet, watching the sky. And somehow that silence felt like a letter too. He whispered, "You hear even what I don't say, right?" The wind outside moved gently. And in his heart, Yunus felt it. Yes. Yunus sat with his notebook and thought of something big. He wrote, "Dear Allah, if someone makes a big mistake, will you still love them?" That night, his dad told him a story about the man who hurt 99 people, then asked Allah for forgiveness, and Allah forgave him. Yunus stared. "Even him?" His dad nodded. "Even him." Yunus wrote quickly, "Dear Allah, then maybe you'll forgive me too when I mess up." At school, he saw someone cheat during a test. His heart said, "Tell the truth," but fear whispered louder. He stayed quiet and felt heavy inside. That night, he didn't write a fancy letter. Just one sentence. "I should have been braver." He tucked it under his pillow with a small tear. The next morning, he prayed Fajr. After Sujud, he stayed a little longer. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll do better." Later, he told the teacher privately what he saw. She nodded kindly. "Thank you for your honesty." And just like that, the heaviness lifted. Yunus wrote, "Dear Allah, telling the truth felt scary, but it also felt like peace." One evening, he brought his notebook outside. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. He didn't write a question, just, "You made this. It's beautiful." The wind blew gently, turning a page. He smiled. Okay, he laughed. "I'll write one more." So he did. "Dear Allah, when I grow up, I want to help people find you, like you found me." His little sister peeked over. "What are you writing?" "A letter to Allah," he said. She blinked. "Does he write back?" Yunus smiled. "All the time. You just have to notice." She nodded. "Can I write one too?" "Of course," he said, handing her a blank page. And so, Two quiet writers sat side by side, writing with their hearts. Years later, Yunus kept the notebook, worn, full, but priceless. He still wrote in it, but not to ask, mostly to thank. He once wrote, "Dear Allah, you didn't always answer the way I expected, but you always answered with what I needed. Thank you." And with that, he closed the notebook, placed it gently in a box marked Letters to Allah. He whispered, "You've read every word, even the ones I never wrote." Moral of the story: talking to Allah doesn't always need loud words or fancy du'as. Sometimes it's a quiet letter, a whisper, or even a tear. He hears it all, and he always responds. Moral of the story: talking to Allah doesn't always need loud words or fancy du'as. Sometimes it's a quiet letter, a whisper, or even a tear. He hears it all, and he always responds.